We are live, Myth Vision Podcast. Welcome back. I'm your host, Derek Lambert. Ladies and gentlemen, holidays are coming, and I have a special treat. Dr. James D. Tabor has joined us today. How are you, my friend?
Good to see you, Derek. It's been a while, so we're going to talk about a lot of things, but mainly Messiah is my favorite subject, of course.
So. I knew it would be. In fact, when we were on tour last year in Israel, there was so much information that you were giving. I was just like, wow, there's a lot here to learn from you. And I'm hoping that people today can have fun doing that as well.
Guess what, Derek? You've read this book.
Yes.
Also Sent to Paradise. Did you know, and I might be the only one in the world who's suggested this, that Paul thought he was one of the messiahs? Yes. So ask me about that later. There's a whole chapter in this book on it.
You're one of the first scholars.
Do you remember that? Do you remember do you remember what I argue? But we'll get into it.
Yeah. You're one of the first scholars I've ever come across who actually made that statement about Paul that I had ever read, right? Because I haven't read far and wide. I'm sure there's others who've mentioned that there's something going on there, but you really highlighted that for me, and I've never heard of that. So shameless plugs to knock those out here real quick. We've got Dr. James Tabor's YouTube channel. You got something you're working on right now that's not public yet?
It's a series. You see that number 22?
Yes, sir.
Because of the war, partly in Israel today, I decided to shape it more with our own time, not just all through history, although I've done all through history. And so number 23 that I just recorded today, I take John Hagee. Does that name ring a bell with you?
Yes.
Big evangelical prophecy guy, probably the biggest since Hal Lindsey. He has Cornerstone Church in San Antonio, Texas, 20,000 people attending on a Sunday in about 10 services. I don't know how he gets them all in. And so I took his interview about his latest prophecy book and clip parts of it, and I go through and basically deconstruct it. And I haven't titled it yet, but I'm going to call it, I think, The Fatal Flaw of Evangelical Christian Expectations, because I'm not going to tell you what the fatal flaw is, but there is one. So
that's exciting.
Yeah, get me over 50,000. I don't know if a bell rings or what, but I'd like to get that number.
Also, we're going to be talking about something today on Messiahs in the time of Jesus, but also a little before that, specifically the course that we did, Jesus and the Dead Sea Scrolls. Well, you did on MVP courses. This is an interesting angle that I know people have tried to tackle in the past. Usually evangelicals in many ways try to, make a lot of these connections or try to act like this is contemporaneous to Jesus. But you're pointing out this stuff happened before Jesus and might even be the forerunners, the inspiration behind the Jesus that we're seeing, this Messianic figure that we have kind of a shadow of in the biblical text of the New Testament. And a lot of the things that the Essene or the Qumran community, depending on, because I know that that's debated as well amongst academics, that there's so much that highlights in the New Testament that we see there as well. So sign up for the course. I will say this, we're really talking without Ryan knowing exactly or giving us the exact rundown, but Black Friday's here. And let's just say there's going to be a special here for everybody who's helped support, giving a discount for everybody who's interested in taking some of the courses.
Yeah, I'll leave that to you guys. You guys do the pricing and, whatever you think is right, because you have a bunch of courses, not just mine. But
yes.
Yeah. And on that course, we're going to talk about it in detail, the Messianic part of it. But the thing that people forget, the Dead Sea Scrolls date to about 100 to 150 years before Jesus. Like if you take their main charter, we call it the community rule. And in the course, we literally go through all of it, line by line. That definitely dates to the BCE period. So 100 years before Jesus, maybe a little more. But it doesn't mention the teacher yet. So it's even earlier probably. But here's what people tend to forget. The movement goes down through Jesus' time, John the Baptist, Jesus, James even, and they don't leave Qumran. This is based on the archaeology until 70 AD or CE, when the Romans destroyed Jerusalem. Then they head down to Jericho, 19 miles to the tip of the Dead Sea. They wipe out Qumran. And most of us, we don't know, but most of us that work on this have supposed that maybe that's when they hid the scrolls, assuming they hid the scrolls. Some people say, oh, it's a Geniza, where you store old manuscripts that are worn out.
Right.
But they weren't worn out. Like the Isaiah scroll is perfect. You can read it today. It wasn't worn out. I think it was their treasure trove of their historic archives, imagine. But they exist, is my point, all the way down to the 1st century. So they're going to have to react to other figures coming along that is not their guy, because their guy, we call him the teacher of righteousness. We don't know his name. He's gone by the time of Jesus. He's been dead quite a few years, probably 100 years. So if I were to date him, I'd put him 75 BCE. I kind of go with Michael Wise on that. We cover that in the course. And so, but think about that, because that would mean that even though we go to, Jesus and early Christianity and so forth, it's not as though those people disappeared. Our main source for the Essenes, if you're going to use that term to describe them, right, that's what Josephus uses. He is talking about this group, I think. But the point is, here he is talking about the Essenes, and he writes his Jewish War in 75, looking back on it all. So we always have to keep that in mind, that they're aware of Herod and the different things that happen in the 1st century, as well as going back to their founding. So we cover that in the course, of course. So.
Well, I definitely enjoyed learning things I'd never explored pertaining to the teacher of righteousness and the Dead Sea Scrolls in the course as well. And one of the hot topics that I find, you're going to be doing the Zoom call this. Oh, by the way, just to give a shout out to the super chatter here, Josephus Zeno, thank you so much. Thanks for the great information, gentlemen.
And I even messed up his birth date. Is he like Josephus returned, right? Or he follows
Zeno? Sorry, Josephus.
He's a Josephus that follows Zeno.
Right?
Yeah, okay.
I wanted to ask you, because I know you did a pretty popular video over there on Apologia's channel, and there is this tension in the academic community on New Testament studies pertaining to the idea and models surrounding Jesus's death and what they did with him after he died. So there's a group that oftentimes will say cognitive dissonance explains once Jesus dies, they have to rationalize, and then they explain everything after he's dead, making him this guy who was aiming to die on purpose or potentially actually going and dying. But then there's like the people like I think Jason Staples and others who say this guy, this historical guy, actually went on a mission, potentially to die, or in hopes that God would come in and intercede through the suffering model. And I imagine you're going to get into some of this Sunday on the Zoom call.
Yeah. And what I've decided to do with the Zoom call, we already had one last month. We do it like the last Sunday of the month, usually. So coming up this Sunday, you can join us still on Sunday. And if you think, well, I haven't even started the course, it doesn't matter. Because what I've decided to do in the Zoom calls, I'm going to do Q&A like I always do. And I like to have people, this is not a webinar. Everybody's on the screen and people are gathered around. I want to do a topic, and the topic I think I want to do, I wasn't aware that Jason Staples has this idea, but by far, if you take, critical biblical scholars, Bart calls them real scholars. How he'll often say, if somebody has an idea, is she a real scholar?
Yeah.
And what he means is, you have a PhD, you walk in SBL circles, you present papers, you publish scholarly articles and so forth. As you're not just some fringe person that might have a bogus PhD or something. So yeah, I'm a real scholar. I got a Chicago PhD with Jonathan Smith. That qualifies me. But I'm one of the rare ones. And like I said, I didn't know Jason thought this, but Jason's a smart guy, so I could see why he would think it if he does. I think Jesus anticipated his death, and he got it by finding himself in the texts of scriptures. Now, how would I possibly prove that? Well, what can you prove in terms of the ancient world? You don't prove it. But what would be something in favor of that one could argue? And the answer is the Dead Sea Scrolls. Because in the Dead Sea Scrolls, we have a collection. It was in the very first cave, cave 1, called the Thanksgiving Hymns, the Hodayot. And we go through it in the course. It's one of the things we do in the course. And we think some of them, and maybe more than, I take a minimalist view that hymn 10 through 17 are actually written by the teacher himself. So I think more than that might be, but you want to kind of be conservative so you can make your case.
Mm-hmm.
And what you find as you look at those is he's very aware of the idea that he is going to go through suffering and that he is going to be led to the slaughter and be betrayed and so forth, as if he's anticipating it, and he's quoting scriptures. And then the group then later, looking back, begins to quote scriptures that he referred to. Strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered. I started to say shattered, both scattered and shattered.
Right.
That's from Zechariah and so forth. That is something that's put into the second edition of another scroll called the Damascus document. Could be losing people with all the technicalities, but the point would be that as you delve into the scrolls, it looks like that community might have been studying some of the same prophetic texts. And the dynamic, I call it the dynamics of Messianic self-identity. I've written about this on my blog. There are even articles. I think we're going to go to my blog in a bit. But so what do I mean by the dynamics of Messianic self-identity? It's like, how does somebody decide I might be the one? In Judaism, and because it's a textually based Messianic hope, you find yourself in these texts. And the alternative idea, which most hold, I have a minority position here, is that, well, things happen, and then the community in its disappointment goes and tries to find texts that will justify what happened, even though they didn't expect it. Okay. And they go, oh, really? He said that he would die. And he said he was going to give his life as a ransom for many. When actually there's the possibility that he's reading Isaiah 53. And even though it is about Israel generally as the suffering servant, there are these individual kinds of elements in the 4 suffering servant hymns. There are 4 suffering servant hymns in Isaiah, but a couple of them take on an individual quality, like a person is talking to God. And at one point, God even says, oh, you think it's a small thing that I want you to regather the tribes of Israel? And you go like, well, Israel wouldn't be regathering the tribes of Israel, right? So it's actually talking about a figure, even though as a whole, the servant in 2nd Isaiah or 3rd Isaiah, it's actually 2nd Isaiah, most of them, the servant is the nation of Israel for sure. But then who is the faithful servant that brings Israel back? So you get that kind of dynamic. So I'm convinced that it's more likely that Jesus himself, like the Dead Sea Scroll leader, is reading those texts and thinking, if I'm the one, then does that mean I'll have to go about and suffer? And like I said, it could go either way. This is like a double-sided coin. You could say, yeah, but I can make the other argument. Of course you can. But you just have to think, because you'll hear all the time, there's no idea of a Davidic Messiah suffering anywhere in the Hebrew Bible. And then I'm thinking, oh, really? What about Zechariah, where Zechariah talks about them looking at the one they've pierced, and then the family of David mourning for this pierced Messiah one? That's in the book of Zechariah. Now, Christians love that. They say it's Jesus, right? You remember, they'll look on the one they pierced. It's quoted in the book of Revelation, I think. Every eye will see him, including those that pierced him. Mm-hmm. So that's in the book of Revelation. So the Christians are applying it that way. But the point is, it was written long before the time of the teacher or even Jesus. And you can see how someone might appropriate that and reapply it because it's right before the end. It's in Zechariah 12 and 13. There's a whole section there of prophecy. So you do have a pierced Messiah in Zechariah. So, you have to be open to that possibility. So that's what I'm going to discuss in the Zoom meeting on Sunday. I've got a little presentation for the students that are studying the Dead Sea Scrolls, and we'll go through the text and I'll put them up on a screen. And like I said, it's not a webinar. You don't just listen to me talk. Everybody's around, and then you can put up your little virtual hand. We use Zoom, and you can do your little hand up and say, I want to ask a question, and then I can call on you. And we don't often cover all the questions, but we save them and we keep rolling. So the Zoom meeting is just great. We do it extra. It's not part of the course really. We mention it, because
we save the recording and put it in the course for anyone.
We put it in the course because you can't always, I do it on a Sunday at noon Eastern time, but whether you can make it or not, you get the recording, and you get the benefit. And then you can email me questions as well. And also I'm in email contact with my students. Like when I write them, I use a program where I can write them personally, the whole group. And then they can send questions in, and I've got a whole list of questions. So it kind of builds month to month because more and more people are taking it, more and more people are finishing it. When I did this with the Mark course, Derek, you were in a few of those. I think we did 7 or 8. I think we did 8 months of it. I don't know if we'll do that many with the Dead Sea Scroll course, right. But the competence level just kept rising because you get a cadre of people that are hearing all this, even if they can't always be present, and they're listening and they're following. And it's like, wow, we're kind of really digging into this stuff. It's not just go take the course and maybe I'll see you later on another course. I like the idea of being with them.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that people really gravitate to you. They connect with doing these follow-ups, and I hope to see more scholars doing that as well. I wanted to ask you, pertaining to the idea of suffering, before we get to any super chats, because we got one here that I think is going to be interesting, is this idea of martyrdom. I think of the Maccabees and of course the literature that developed around them and how they went out, they were killed and stuff. And it makes me wonder, being Hellenism had influenced at this time, and there is a lot of Greek idea of martyrdom as well. I know that Candida Moss, wrote on the myth of persecution and stuff. A noble death, suicide and martyrdom among Christians and Jews in antiquity. And that's Arthur J. Is that Drudge? Droge. Oh, snap. Co-authored. Uh-oh. Okay, so take us through, tease us with this, James, because...
No, we do. We start all the way back with Socrates and even earlier figures, and we do the Hellenistic martyrdom thing. That book became a classic. I published that, oh my goodness, 92 or 3, I think. I can't remember when I published it, but wow. You can still get it. It's out of print, but you can get plenty of copies because Harper published it, so it's out there. But yeah, we do that. And guess what? We have a chapter on the death of Jesus, and we have Paul, and we have Masada, and we have the Maccabees, of course. Arthur takes some of them and I take others. It's a fully co-authored book. We're kind of equal. His name's first alphabetically, but we work together on it. And it's an important study. And that led me right into some of the stuff that I've done on Paul, because in Philippians, remember, he talks about, I don't know what to choose, whether to depart and be with Christ, sort of like, should I die as a martyr?
Right.
Will I remain here or whatever? Jesus himself, if possible, let this cup pass from me. At least we get in the Gospel of Mark and the Synoptics. So we discuss all of that. And yes, there is a sort of a model, and the model all has to do really with the title of the book, A Noble Death. Now, there's different kinds of death, but you could call it death by choice. But death by choice could have ignoble purposes as well. Somebody could be depressed or in despair, or somebody could kill themselves. We call it whenever there's one of those horrible mass shootings, often the person at the end will shoot themselves, right? Kind of like death by cop, they call it, or they let themselves be shot because you weren't able to face what you did, and therefore you're leaving. But there's also a noble death. So martyr comes from the idea that you gave a testimony, okay? And that your death was a testimony to something, to the cause that you died for. So it could be military deaths for a noble cause. We talk about just and unjust wars and so forth. Now, these messiahs, though, do you have my blog handy?
Yes.
That page I mentioned, Josephus Messiahs. Yeah.
In the time of Jesus.
Yeah. People can find this. By the way, look at the right on the screen, and there's my newsletter too. You can sign up for it. It's free.
Sign up for it.
And I protect your emails. Don't worry about, is he going to sell them to Derek or something? I'm just kidding.
Listen, I've got a good price I can
Okay.
give.
Anyway, as you go on through this, I just went through Josephus, and he refers to groups sometimes. He calls them brigands, or lestes is the Greek word, robbers, because he's writing for the Romans. This is mostly in the Jewish wars, you can see. But look at all of them. We could just read the list. Can you see the list really well?
You want me to read them?
Yeah, just read them. What the heck? Some of them, 3 of them are mentioned in the New Testament. So let's check them off. We got Hezekiah. Go ahead.
Yeah, Hezekiah, Ezekias, defeated by Herod in 47 BCE, Jewish war. Of course, I'm not going to read the sources, but you can go there.
Just read the names of the guys.
Yeah, Judas, a.k.a. Theudas, son of Ezekias, 4 BCE.
Hey, look, there's a father-son thing. Very important. Now, that's not Judas the Galilean. Everybody gets mixed up. We're going to get to him.
Wow.
That's Judas. That's the guy that Herod defeated in order to take over rule. The Romans were very happy with him.
Okay. Simon of Perea, 4 BCE, death of Herod.
That's amazing.
Is it a Thronges?
Yes. The shepherd king. Does that tell you any? I bet he was Davidic.
Yeah, most likely, huh? Judas the Galilean, 6 CE, Archelaus removed.
Now look how many were 4 BC. Look at that. Judas, Simon, and Athronges were all 4 BC. Why? Because Herod the Great had died. Vacuum. King of the Jews is dead. Remember, Herod was declared king of the Jews by the Romans. All of a sudden, 3 guys crop up in 1 year. I'm it. I'm the guy. I'm the Messiah. Right. And they were all suffering messiahs because they all got killed. Now, did they anticipate their deaths? I don't know, because all we have is the simple description. Keep going. You got
Theudas, 44 CE. James and Simon, 46 CE, sons of Judas the Galilean, crucified by Tiberius Alexander, nephew of Philo, who was a procurator.
Isn't that interesting? So you got Judas the Galilean had 2 kids, James and Simon. Wait a minute. Jesus has 2 brothers, James and Simon. They're both martyred, right? Remember Simon? Supposedly he was over 100 years old when he got martyred. This is not them. This is sons of Judas the Galilean. Then you got the Egyptian.
Yep, the Egyptian.
That's mentioned in the book of Acts. I give the references.
Yep, Eleazar, son of Judas the Galilean.
Another son of Judas the Galilean. Goodness.
Yep, and then Eleazar, son of Jairus, Benyar, commander of Masada, was of the family of Menachem.
Yeah, Menachem. So anyway, it's just a short little rundown. So here would be the question. These figures apparently identified themselves in the text. And they would, of course, go for the text of power and glory, because that's what the Messiah is supposed to do. There are texts that have to do with power and glory, but also right with them can be the suffering as well. And so that's what I think might be going on with Jesus. And I'm pretty sure with the teacher, especially if you will grant me that he wrote some of the Thanksgiving hymns, because you have this first person reference to someone who believes he's going to suffer. And then, Derek, it goes further than that. We have some materials from Cave 4 that we didn't know where to put them. Originally, people thought they might be with the War Scroll, a couple of fragments, and I'm going to cover them when I do this thing on Zoom. And now we're putting them with the Thanksgiving hymns. And Martin Abegg, for example, has argued, he's one of the great Dead Sea Scroll scholars that I've learned a lot from. He even argues that the teacher is probably the one that the hymn is referring to. And guess what it says? I've been exalted to the council of the Elohim. I have a seat among the gods. Now you study all of this literature all the way back. I know because you've done Enoch stuff and so forth.
Right.
So you know this is not necessarily some new surprising thing.
Yeah.
The idea that you would go through sufferings, enter into the lower world and struggle with death, come forth victorious and be exalted to heaven,
Even becoming a god
that we can find in the Hellenistic world. I know your friend Miller works on this. I think Robin does as well. Doesn't she, Faith Falls? She works on some of these things.
I'm sure she writes
some
on
of the stories, and lots of people that work with Hellenistic literature deal with this. And I don't know that it means Jesus was reading Homer or something. I would rather think that he's probably immersing himself in some of the prophetic texts of the Hebrew Bible. Because that's the kind of thing that gets quoted in the Dead Sea Scrolls as well. But either way, the idea and the pattern can be very similar, because it's almost like Campbell thought of, kind of universal archetypes.
Right.
The hero struggling with his enemies, suffering, maybe even being killed, and then overcoming death and being triumphant and being exalted or something like that. It's kind of a natural pattern when you think about it.
Right.
But I'm not talking about mystery religions and vegetarian deities or something like that. I'm talking about martyrdom figures.
Mm-hmm.
Even in the Maccabees, do you remember what the martyrs in Second Maccabees say when they're doing these horrible things, cutting their tongues out and frying their body parts? And I don't even want to go over all they do. Gruesome. But what do they say? You will die and never come back. I will be raised from the dead. Now everybody says, oh, well, that's the general resurrection. Well, I don't care if it's general resurrection or their resurrection. They're expressing hope that even if you die, yet shall you live. And so Paul has that same view, that his suffering is going to lead to his glorification. And guess what? He extends it to the followers, right? What does he say in Romans 8? We will be glorified with him, provided that we suffer with him.
Right.
That's exactly what we find in the Dead Sea Scrolls. In Habakkuk Pesher, I'm not going to give everything away now, but just to tantalize people, the scroll group is writing about the teacher, and they say we will be saved by our faith in the teacher and our suffering. And they realize that this idea of being the righteous community that follows God, even if it leads to your death. So, it's just so interesting to study into.
So I'll take this one moment to say, before we get to super chats, because we wanted to do a quick hangout here and discuss this and tease people, hoping to get more people to sign up, Black Friday special, the whole nine, is this idea of suffering messiahs and stuff. It's prevalent. It's not only Hellenistic, it's also Jewish. I think it's been married to Judaism sometime earlier. And so this tradition can be all within the vein of Judaism and still have a lot in common with that other side of the coin. Go ahead and let everybody know Black Friday specials for all the MVP courses. And of course, you're going to want to sign up for Jesus in the Dead Sea Scrolls. This Sunday, he's doing a Zoom call with all students who've signed up. And if you can't make it, we understand. It'll be recorded and it will be saved there. But it's always good to see the students showing up and hanging out.
if you signed up by Sunday morning, even the link is going to be there.
Yeah.
In other words, the meeting starts at noon Eastern, but Ryan puts the link on. She's going to put the link up probably Friday morning. Right. I'm going to give it to her tomorrow on Thanksgiving, and she'll put it up. So you could even sign up, now, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, even Sunday morning, and you could come to the Zoom meeting.
Well, if you did sign up now, though, they can watch the course. And at least,
I want them to sign up now, because at least you could watch the opening of it.
Right.
Yeah. So
exactly.
Some of you are so diligent, you could watch all 10 lessons before we even look at all these courses. Wow.
I know. There's Robin Faith Walsh, Kip Davis, and that one's 18 lectures. It's a big one. There's obviously Dennis McDonald. That's 18 lectures as well. And there's more courses, of course, and New Testament studies for everybody. We did our Mark course, and then Del Allison Jr., and then M. David Litwa, and the New Testament course was with Richard Carrier. We just got a bunch of different courses, and we have more coming.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, well, good to see you, Derek. I hope to see some people on Sunday, and either way, I'll see you virtually from time to time. So